If you are human, you know what it's like to be stressed. But what is stress exactly? Is all stress unhealthy, or can our stress response help us adapt and build resilience? How does stress affect our mental and physical health? And how can we effectively respond to and manage stress? In today's episode of the Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers podcast, we discuss these questions and try to give you some useful tips for dealing with life's inevitable stressors. For those of you who are new to the show, welcome. Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Numinous Network and is hosted by me, Dr. Steve Thayer, and my co-host, Dr. Reid Robison. Just a few quick announcements for you before we get into the episode. If you are looking for comprehensive foundational training in psychedelic-assisted therapy that includes live online classes, experiential learning, and opportunities to connect with a diverse community of practitioners in the psychedelic medicine space, then check out our courses. We're currently offering 10% off select courses for PTF podcast listeners, so you can click on the link in the show notes or go directly to numinousnetwork.com/training, and you can use the code PTF10 for that 10% discount. If you've listened to the show for a while, you've likely heard Reid and myself talk about the clinical trial work that Numinous Network does. If you live in Utah and you're interested in being a participant in a psychedelic clinical trial, you can click on the link in the show notes or go directly to numinousnetwork.com/research to learn more about the trials we're currently running. If you'd like to support the show, here's how you do it. You can leave us a rating or review in places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, and please share the episode with someone you think might enjoy it. Without further delay, here is our episode today about practical tools for understanding and managing stress. So Reid, we're going to talk about something today that I think everybody listening can relate to, and that is stress. You ever been stressed before, Reid?
Never, because do you know what stressed spell is when you spell it backwards?
No.
Dessert. No, I feel stress every day, and it's interesting. I've always held this belief that like calmness or being able to regulate one's nervous system is a superpower. And it's something I've been in this active pursuit of nervous system regulation personally, professionally for quite some time, but it feels like the last year or two I have been faced with a new batch of work in terms of like new stress, new times I find myself hurrying when I don't need to be, or tensed up when without realizing it first. So it's a good topic, apropos.
Yeah. And based on what you just said, that we can talk about perhaps the different kinds of stress, because usually when people talk about stress, they're talking about stress management. They're talking about ways to minimize stress, to get into that Zen peaceful state as often as possible. And sort of the destructive form of stress is something to be addressed for sure, but not all stress is necessarily maladaptive or destructive, right?
Yeah, we need some. So let's break it down into eustress and distress, I suppose. The good stress and the less good stress when it's distress.
Yeah. Stress generally is just sort of the body, the mind's response to a stressor, right? To some kind of stimulus, whether external or internal. And it's important, right? If we didn't have some kind of response to potential stressors in our environment, we probably wouldn't have made it as a species. So to have our central nervous system react and mobilize our body and our mind to address a threat is important. It's an important part of sort of this alarm system that is baked into our human species, right?
Yeah. I think of the immune system as an example of this, that it seems easy for most people to kind of wrap their mind around, because you know that if you don't encounter any germs, if you go too extreme in that regard early in life and don't present your immune system with stressors, then you won't have it responding to these manageable challenges and building its capabilities and capacity and resilience and functioning,
Yeah. I think the immune system is a good metaphor because also we have things like allergies and autoimmune conditions where the immune system is responding in a way to to a stimulus, a stressor that actually isn't threatening to the body in an overactive way. So a lot of what creates distress is the way our mind and our bodies react to a stressor. And so sometimes the difference between whether this is adaptive and a challenge that strengthens us versus a challenge that sort of harms us or destroys us is how one reacts to it. It's not all about reaction, but reaction is an important component.
Yeah, yeah. And so maybe this is just kind of, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but I wonder what you think, Steve, on the distinction between stress and anxiety, how you draw that line.
Mm. Yeah, I think stress and anxiety, anxiety feels more like an emotional cognitive response to stressors, maybe. Like we can invent stressors. Thinking of somebody with generalized anxiety disorder that's appraising their environment, both external and internal cues, um, in a sort of negatively biased way. Like this, I have to worry about this thing. What if this happens? What if that happens? And so the body's responding to stressors that maybe be either misinterpreted or sometimes even totally invented. Like I'm imagining what this person I met at a party is thinking about me. And so the stressor is sort of created in the mind, and that turns
Yeah.
into social anxiety, for example.
Yeah, there's some interplay there, but I like what you were saying earlier of like just pointing out the stress is a response to some external stimulus, stressor, demand, threat, even,
Mm-hmm.
where anxiety is more this state of worry or fear. And it, like you said, could be more vague, could have like rumination as part of it, can persist more, where stress tends to kind of come and go if the stressor is removed, and anxiety may be what perpetuates it in many cases.
Yeah, it reminds me of Sapolsky's book that we've referenced a couple of times, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, right?
Yeah, I
And
love the title.
this idea that other mammals, they'll respond to a threat to protect themselves, run away, and then afterward they discharge that energy by trembling or shaking, and then they don't, you don't get a lot of zebras who have PTSD or ruminate on the fact that
Hmm.
they noticed an alligator in the river and were able to escape.
Yeah, yeah, it's really. I love when the title is just so telling on its own. Um, but it might be helpful to look at just for a sec. Like, how would you differentiate some of the kind of mental, emotional, physical signs of either one? Like, stress might show up more with a feeling of overwhelm, frustration, irritability, where anxiety typically might be more fear, dread, apprehension. Um, and like if you're stressed, you might have racing thoughts, but it could be more task focused, where anxiety could have a intrusive, catastrophic flair to it, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I think of, a stress being something more acute to respond to. Certainly, there are chronic stressors, like if you live in chronic financial poverty, that it could be a chronic stressor that you could have anxiety about as well. But
Yeah.
but yeah, stress is maybe something like a certain threat, like or a change or a challenge, like you said, that you have an opportunity to respond to, and it could morph into anxiety for sure.
Yeah. Another another kind of way I distinguish it pretty easily, and maybe it's just a personal example because I give a lot of PowerPoint presentations, but say you have a presentation tomorrow, you feel pressure, heart races. I'm like, when I'm in that mode, I work faster. Like I get distracted less. I dial in, and like there's nothing like a looming deadline to put you into action. And after it's done, you can relax. But then anxiety is more like, for example, after you finish the presentation, you can't stop thinking about what could have gone wrong
Mm.
and worry about future events that may never happen. You know?
Yeah, so it's about what the stressor is, but it's also about what happens next, right? And how you receive and interpret that stressor. So, like you're pointing out, stressors can be mobilizing, right? And if we use that energy and point it toward sort of addressing the stressor, then that can lead to resilience. It can lead to confidence later on. So if I'm going to give a talk, or a presentation or a speech, and I'm feeling stressed, maybe even a little bit anxious about it, nervous, I will, in my mind, go back to all the other times I've done this and it's turned out okay. Or the times when I've even doubted myself and then performed better than I thought. And that sort of reduces the feeling of stress. Stress can be so much that it immobilizes you. So you try to get in the middle of that stress curve so that it can mobilize you for productive action.
Yes. And so we went on this little anxiety tangent perhaps, but I like bringing it back to stress and in focusing on what to do about it. Like, how do we navigate the world that's full of so much of it? So I like it. And we could take an inventory of some strategies and maybe even some consequences of not addressing it, short and long term.
Yeah, let's do that. I think, and maybe to set the stage, there are other factors that make using those strategies either more or less likely or more or less challenging, right? There are individual differences between human beings, personality and temperament, for example, that can affect how one experiences stress. So if you score high on neuroticism, for example, you have sort of this trait where you tend to worry and fret a bit more than maybe somebody who scores lower on neuroticism. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to sort of make use of, maybe even more important for you, but difficult to make use of some of these strategies we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And I kind of, when working on training the nervous system for stress, and I think I get this from yoga practice, is I operate under this kind of belief that repeated activation of the relaxation response can not only help melt your stress in the short term, but can even reverse and train the nervous system, but can reverse sustained problems that you can accumulate in the body and the mind, the wear and tear, if you will, that's brought on by stress without the ability to relax efficiently after it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So that brings to mind a lot of the common things people might hear in a conversation about stress management. So repeated activation of the rest and digest, right? Of that parasympathetic nervous system response, like deliberately getting into a space of peace and calm. So yoga would be a great example. Physical exercise generally. I mean, like I said, there are the basic things that keep your body and mind and nervous system strong and flexible and resilient, like sleep and nutrition and exercise and social connection. These are the things that, if aren't present, increases all-cause mortality. It doesn't just make you more prone to, anxiety and depression and things. By some estimates, chronic stress can increase all-cause mortality by 20 or 30%.
Yeah, that's wild. It's wild. And yeah, you look at the long term. I remember this being blown away in med school on this front of the number of conditions, both mental and physical, that have a sizable kind of attributable causative factor of stress in the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if people have a serious illness like cancer and things like that, or hypertension or whatever, stress affects how they're going to cope or heal or not heal from those conditions.
Yeah. I saw, this is like a Lancet paper. It's an old one, but wound healing slows by 25 to 50% under stress.
Yeah.
And not to mention like the chronic things, like you were alluding to, the all-cause mortality, but chronic stress and risk of coronary artery disease, metabolic syndrome, IBS symptoms, the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it makes sense to pay attention to stress, and it makes sense to manage stress. So like you were saying, maybe we talk about some things that people can do to manage stress, both chronic and acute stressors, to make the body and mind more resilient.
Yeah. And I think it starts with, we've already mentioned this somewhat, but starts with an inventory of how is my nervous system doing in this moment. It's one of my favorite check-in questions. I can't speak today, but like, and also asking, how is my nervous system doing, but what does it need? Or what's the most loving thing I can do for myself or my nervous system in this moment? Because you want to see where you're at in this like window of tolerance, if you will. If you're in the window of like, life isn't perfect, but you could find some calm and alertness and a variety of emotions to be able to interpret and be able to work with them. But as you get into the dysregulation categories, kind of above or below that, towards hyper arousal, like stressed, anxious, out of control, or hypoarousal, just shut down, I'm peacing out, frozen, numb. There's not a lot of productive work you can do outside of your window of tolerance.
Right. And if you do those check-ins like you're describing, you start to understand yourself. You start to see the signs. So I know that if I feel like I want to burn it all to the ground and go run up into the mountains and never talk to anybody again and never, have another responsibility, I have a few questions I need to ask myself first, before I take those actions. How am I sleeping? Right? Am I getting enough sleep? Have I taken more than 1,000 steps? Right? Am I exercising my body? Have I been isolating myself? Do I need to, have some great contact with people I love and, people who love me? Am I nourishing my body, or am I over-consuming caffeine to compensate for the fatigue? So these are some basic things that every doctor would probably ask you when you go in for your regular checkup, but they're so important. So chill out, Steve. Don't make any rash decisions before you take care of these very important, sort of baseline things.
Yeah, and there is a state change possible by many different activities. I think of the impact of like a damn good song on one's mood and nervous system, or even more so if you were to engage in singing or dancing, and what how you feel before that and like 10 minutes later is striking. But I think it brings to mind these simple categories of ways to regulate the nervous system and move through stress with the breath, with humor, laughter, with physical comfort, with music, and things like that.
It's amazing how those simple things can pivot everything relatively quickly. You mentioned dancing. I saw an interesting comparison of things like exercise, singing, laughter. Dancing was in there, and dancing was near the top, if not at the top, of things that can help make one of those sort of central nervous system shifts pretty quick.
Yeah.
So turn on some beats and start dancing. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've seen that in like ecstatic dance circles, for example, are a good way where people can go seek it out without a dance background. And there's a container to try and help people feel comfortable, like without cell phones and whatnot. And the encouragement to just move however your body wants to move. And, there's often a debriefing circle at the end, and it's really touching to hear people's experience getting in their body and moving through some of this, like you'd see in like Peter Levine's books, where he talks about animals in the wild after a big stressor or trauma, if you will just go out. When that's done, go out and shake it off, or your dog could do the same. And we as humans are at risk of keeping it bottled in, and because we're all like pressure cookers, it's going to spill out somehow at some point in maladaptive ways, as the pressure cooker starts to blow and crack and eventually blow its lid.
Yeah, move that energy around. So whether it's ecstatic dance, for me, sometimes I like to do yard work. Right. If I'm stressed out because, let's say, I've got a lot of decisions to make and it's not clear how I'm going to make those decisions, and I'm spending a lot of time in my head, then I will go do tasks that are very clear and easily accomplished. And for me, that's the yard, right? I can see a patch of weeds and weed the yard, or I can mow the lawn, or I can go water something. And it gets me outside, it gets me moving, and it's almost like the chop wood, carry water advice. If I can just go out there and do something simple that I can see progress in, it's a great way to change the state.
Yeah, I like that. And change the state is such a cool concept. I'm thinking of these inventories we use in research a lot, like the state trait approaches to assessing one's anxiety or mindfulness or whatever it is in the moment. But there is the how are you at baseline and how are you in this moment, and of course a relation between those. But it's a reminder of the ability we have to shift our state, like to shift it back to a more adaptive and fully functioning place.
Yeah. So we've got dancing, we got body movement, we've got social connection. And then, you mentioned yoga. Sometimes just, I've noticed that a breathing focused meditation is another way to change my state, mental and physical. So, you could look up something on YouTube, or you could just sit in a quiet room, close your eyes, and pay attention to your breath. And as things, this is sort of classic mindfulness, right? But as things compete for your attention and erupt into the radar of your consciousness, you acknowledge them, categorize them, and then return to the breath. And this is something that for any of you who have meditated fairly consistently over a long period of time, that can also help change your, I would say, potentially even your trait levels of anxiety and stress.
Yeah, totally.
As your body learns to get into that space.
So it reminds me of one study on mindfulness that has stood out to me over the years, and I've thought about lately in my personal life, because I found myself in the face of more stress, or just not feeling as it doesn't feel as easy to move through it as maybe it did a number of months ago. I find myself getting in a cold plunge less and almost shying away from discomfort more, when that may be a remedy, or that would certainly be a potential strategy for kind of not only changing state, but training the nervous systems. But I think of this Wisconsin study of expert meditating monks versus non-meditators and their response to pain. Like, I think when I'm not feeling in that kind of dialed in a nervous system state, pain, I might fear it more or feel it more intensely. And they did in the study. So these non-meditators, they took a heated metal thing and put it on the arm of the participants. The ethics board had to approve it, so it wasn't going to be that hot or burning them permanently. But there was pain, and everyone felt it. But the interesting thing in the study, they said beforehand, you're going to be exposed to this pain in 10 seconds, and they were scanning people and collecting other data points. And in the non-meditators, the pain centers in the brain reacted instantly when they were told the pain is coming. But the meditators, seasoned meditators, did not. They didn't respond until the heat was applied. And so you have these non-meditators that are pulling non-real pain from the future and feeling it now, in addition to the pain that's about to come. I find a useful lesson in life, or a good reason to keep getting on that cushion and practicing your meditation, whatever it is for you.
Yeah, it's a good example of how sometimes we will unnecessarily amplify stressors, right? A lot of it is our response, like we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, to that stressor. So somebody who's an experienced meditator is good at staying in the moment. So there isn't that borrowing trouble from the future, or sort of ruminating about the past.
To double your distress, perhaps unnecessarily. Because I'd been wrestling with this concept of kind of pain versus suffering, how much is optional, for years. And pain is very real, and it's hard enough as it is. But suffering, I like to define as the emotional reaction to pain, and we can work on that. We have some control over that.
Yeah. Yeah. So other things that you can think of that help to that end?
Well, this is kind of my emotion-focused therapy, biased and interest spilling out. But what is your relationship with your emotions? How comfortable do you feel with the expression of them, including assertive anger, for example? Because I think in many cases, we have these feelings, these emotions that are fundamentally adaptive things that give us information of how to navigate stress and the world. And but we often aren't willing to feel them. And if you don't let emotions run their course, emotions are there to be felt and expressed and give you that information, then maybe you're not coming back to the baseline as readily. And so I think taking an inventory of feelings and making sure we're not avoiding them, because I believe that emotional suppression of a distressing feeling can kind of keep you stuck there longer.
Yeah, in some ways, this is what good therapy is all about. Sometimes the cute phrase I like to tell people about therapy is that you're going to come to me and I'm not going to help you feel better necessarily. I am going to help you feel better, meaning learn how to feel your emotions. Because our resistance to and rejection of emotions causes distress. It's an example of one of these ways that we create more stress than is necessary. There might be pain associated with sadness, for example. But if we then suppress our sadness, numb it out, it causes more problems. So letting yourself feel the discomfort, perhaps, of an emotion like anger or sadness or even fear is a way to go in and through, like we often say when talking about psychedelics, navigating psychedelic journeys.
Yeah, because the irony is the only thing worse than feeling a painful feeling is not feeling it. And we can, of course, tie all sorts of anxiety, depression, other risks to rejecting our feelings and being stuck in a pattern of suppression. And it also blunts your experience of joy too. You're blunting the good stuff along the way. So I really believe in and encourage cultivating resilience through emotion processing, which could look something like, just what am I feeling? Label it and try to let it be felt. Try to allow it, and then, like I was kind of alluding to, what does that tell you? There's an underlying unmet need often in these emotions. Like if you are feeling sad and you've identified this pit in your stomach and you're kind of hunched over, what does that mean? What does that position it put you in point you towards? Maybe you need some comfort.
Yeah, it's an example of emotions being messengers. And if we allow ourselves to listen to the message, there's often the lesson about how to resolve it right there. Like you pointed out with sadness. I'm feeling sad. Maybe it's because I'm feeling lonely and I need connection. Go seek connection, or I need comfort, or I need to grieve something, right? There's something that I haven't fully allowed my consciousness to encounter and digest. And so I'm feeling really sad about it. So maybe I need to feel sad about it.
Yeah. Maybe your blood is pumping and you need to express your anger in a adaptive, assertive, healthy, empowered way. But here's another one. Tell me if you can relate to this, Steve. Another strategy for stress. Have you ever said something like, could you maybe help me? Absolutely no pressure, though. Totally okay if you don't. Or I could help you instead. Are you mad at me, Steve?
Is that a direct quote from me? Yeah, I've certainly certainly said things like that.
Asking for help is not easy for many people. And but if you think about it, like other species, like some animals are born with their most vital skill first, like run, or a newly hatched snake can bite. But what do babies get as their power when they're born? The ability to cry and signal that they need help because they cannot survive on their own. And at first, and I just think of that, whether it's related or not, to remind myself that it's absolutely okay to ask for help sometimes, and it can be a sign of strength and not weakness. Having a rough day is okay, and you are not alone in it. It's okay to rest. It's okay to not be okay. And there's a lot of beauty and joy found in the giving and receiving of help.
Yeah. So for the people pleasers and perfectionists in our audience, letting people help you is a stress management technique, right? So
Yeah.
I've had to, have had entire episodes on sort of this idea, but I've had to learn and have helped clients learn how to say things like, yeah, that would mean a lot to me, or thank you. Yes, please help me. Even things that they know they quote unquote could do themselves, and it could be just little things. But once you get past that fear of whatever it is, whatever the thing that's motivating you to not allow people help you, and you find that it's almost and oftentimes a gift that you can give somebody else if they've offered to help and you accept that
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. I love reframing it in my mind in that way of like when I find myself shying away for asking for help, but I really do want it, need it perhaps. And I think about that it often is a gift you're giving to someone to connect with you on that front, offer to do something that feels good to them. It feels good to help and be of service, and there's meaning and all this other good stuff on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm. I want to circle back to something else you were saying earlier, like oftentimes when we're feeling really stressed, we might have an inkling of what might help, but we don't want to do it, because if there's effort
Yeah.
involved. And one of my kids was saying the other day, he was feeling kind of lethargic and didn't want to do much. He decided to exercise. It's been a long time since he'd, done a little bit of exercise. So he manages to get himself to exercise. And then afterward, I see him washing one of our windows. I was like, hey, man, thanks for doing that. He's like, yeah, I exercised and all of a sudden I wanted to do stuff. I was like, well, there you go. Sometimes you just got to, the dam's got to break, but you got to choose to approach it and push on it. And then once it does, it's a pretty incredible state shift.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said about that putting one foot in front of the other, the momentum of moving in any direction, in any way, can sometimes be more than half the battle.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of, I know we're kind of meandering around, but you were alluding to this earlier as well. A lot of times we're stressed because there just feels like there's so many things to do or address or unsolvable problems, and we just sort of feel frozen. And oftentimes in those scenarios, we'll numb or we'll shut down, freeze, fall on, whatever. But when you said put one foot in front of the other, it just reminded me of, taking a breath, taking inventory. What can I control? There might be a lot of things that I can't control that are contributing to my distress. So focusing on, even if it's a little thing, what can I control? So a little bit of agency and empowerment. And even if it's a small thing, as I said, just to do one small thing, put that one foot in front of the other, and eventually you build momentum and it feels potent, right?
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me of this whole evidence-based psychotherapy approach to depression and other conditions of behavioral activation theory or therapy of just this interplay between our thoughts, feelings, and our behaviors. And this kind of realization that in sometimes big and simple ways, certain things you do influence your mood or anxiety, like we've been talking about. And behavioral activation is kind of a CBT skill approach that that helps people work on putting those steps in place, taking an inventory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be incredibly powerful. Speaking of stress, my mind just went blank. I'm sure I had something wise to say.
Super wise. Maybe it might be helpful to look at one of the more influential models of stress in psychology just for a minute, of the Lazarus and Folkman transactional model of stress that I think doesn't define stress as something that simply happens to you, like a speeding ticket or a tough conversation, but it paints a picture of it as a dynamic transaction between you and the environment. And like you were pointing out, Steve, it's about how you perceive and respond to it. And I kind of like this because it gives a simple primary and secondary appraisal approach. So when something happens, a stressor, a deadline, an argument, a diagnosis, whatever, you subconsciously ask, what does this mean for me? Is it irrelevant? Maybe it's even positive. But if it feels threatening, like it could cause harm or loss, that's when the stress really kicks in. Then comes a secondary appraisal we do of, can I handle this? You assess your coping resources. You believe you have the tools. And if you do, you're more likely to view it as a challenge, eustress. But if it feels overwhelming, you're more likely to view it as distress. So there's this transaction going on that maybe we can shine a light on and intervene if we're about to go into overwhelming distress by kind of falsely believing we cannot handle it and all is lost.
Yeah, I like that. And the secondary appraisal, the can I handle this? There's a lot that can be done in that emotional and mental calculus, right? I'm thinking of a common thing therapists will do for people who have generalized anxiety, and they distress a lot about potential threats in the future. Like, what about this? What if this happens? What if this happens? And there's often some catastrophization going on where they think that, what's happening is a catastrophe and it's only going to get worse and I won't be able to handle it. You can play the tape forward a bit. Like, let's imagine the worst case scenario. Let's flesh it out. Would it be the end of you? Usually it's not. And what resources do you have? If we look back at how you've handled stress in the past, you've survived it. So we're sort of tamping down the negativity bias and recruiting a more adaptive sort of mental calculus.
Yeah, because, it reminds me of another kind of maladaptive coping mechanism that I find myself doing and is quite common. Some people like to do it more than others, as opposed to the catastrophizing and having it too present, top of mind. There's a risk of falling into avoidant coping, like denial, distraction, but which might help your nervous system in the short term for a minute, but often backfires, right? Understandably. So this transactional stress model helps us see what if we're doing those kind of things and what we're doing, because stress isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you appraise it and respond to it. And that response includes your mind and your body and your behavior.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of ways of approaching that avoidant coping tendency that are sometimes used in sort of the productivity world. If we find ourselves putting off the hard things, putting off the big things, and that as you said, feels good in the short term, but then eventually makes those things pile up. And so there are even books written about this, like Eat the Frog, where you look at the thing you're avoiding the most, do some healthy appraising, and then you do that thing first. You run toward that discomfort as fast and as hard as you can. Which thing, if done, would provide the most relief? It's often the thing you're avoiding the most, because it's just this, this big frog. So you go and you do it fast. And if you can get into that habit, then it sort of changes your automatic response to these things that are very, very stressful. Whereas instead of leaning away and avoiding, you start leaning in and engaging.
Yeah, I like it. And that reminds me, just as a nerdy aside, there is this for the psychometricians out there in the audience, there's a validated measure of eustress versus distress. I think it's called the MEDS scale, like measure of emotional, physical, and behavioral markers of eustress and distress. Probably should be a longer acronym than they settled on, but it has questions, like only 9 questions, but these questions like, I feel excited, I sense I'm exhausted, I'm ready to act, I'm not able to concentrate. And kind of a simple way of teasing out, but if it doesn't feel easy to you, no, at first attempt, no problem. Just bust out the questionnaire, and that's kind of like a helpful mirror in turning your awareness inward.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, get a little data can be helpful.
Yeah, or ask your friends and loved ones how they view your relationship with stress from their perspective. It's interesting. If you're open to that and you have the right container and relationship dynamic, those can be really fun conversations.
Yeah. I'm thinking of another strategy that some people call stress inoculation. You're talking about the immune system metaphor. So choosing to do, moderately challenging things as a sort of way of moving through the world helps build up your resilience and sort of inoculates you to maybe some of those bigger stressors that come that you don't have any control over. So you mentioned cold exposure. That's kind of a fun example. Not that cold plunges cure everything that ails you, and they've become kind of trendy as of late, but just the idea of willingly doing something that's challenging so that you are getting into the habit of leaning into challenging things. And with our kids, this was one thing, like, we wanted them to at least have one thing going on in their life in addition to school and stuff like that, that was challenging for them. So whether it was participating in some kind of athletics or, learning a musical instrument, or, anything that they kind of wanted to do or curious about, but they were nervous about, that was challenging, just to sort of build that stress inoculation muscle a little bit.
Yeah. It's a fun term to inoculate. This reminds me of microbiology. But do you want to hear a poem that I quite like?
Yeah.
Called The Peace of Wild Things, that I think relates, by Wendell Berry, who wrote, "When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night, at least the sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water. I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free."
I don't know if this is exactly what Wendell was talking about, but there is some research on just being in quote unquote nature,
Earthing,
forest bathing, right?
Yeah.
Literally, it's lowering blood pressure. It's helping people feel calm, and that's another thing, sort of a standard. As I'm going through the inventory I talked about earlier, like, I'm fraying at the edges. What am I not doing that I need to be doing? One of those things is being outside, and not just in my backyard, but like in the forest, in the mountains.
Yeah. Every time I take an inventory of like stress and even like, my own spirituality and whatever, that's one of the common things that I am kind of struck by, is like, oh yeah, I have not been seeking solace and refuge in the beautiful nature that is very close by. But yeah, so I think there's a lot to that. And I have one more quote, if you'll allow it, from Thich Nhat Hanh on being at peace in a world of trauma, who says that when you breathe in, your mind comes back to your body, and then you become fully aware that you're alive and that you are a miracle, and everything you touch could be a miracle. The orange in your hand, the blue sky, the face of a child. And that is a miracle because you know the role that suffering plays in life, and you're not trying to run away from suffering anymore.
Yeah, that phrase, perspective is everything, just popped in my mind as I was listening to that quote.
Yeah.
Because I don't always feel like a miracle, that's for sure. Sometimes I feel like the opposite, a curse, maybe. That life is a curse, and I bet many of you can relate to that when it just gets really, really stressful.
Yeah, and it reminds me of how we so often do get caught up in the pain and stress of the moment and forget who we really are, whatever we believe in that regard, or whatever we call. It's hard to find someone who wouldn't believe that being human is a miracle if you're going to debate it, right? But we forget it so easily. And I've found that, any way I can connect with something bigger than myself and my pain and my stress and my problems in the moment works wonders for putting that in perspective and making it feel a little more small and manageable.
Yeah. I think contemplating what you're thankful for, the gratitude practices have also become a meme, but they are well studied, and it's hard to be savoring the things that you're thankful for and be super, super stressed and depressed and anxious at the same time. So that's another thing that can be a regular practice, or sort of a just-in-time break glass in case of fire practice, is let me just think and contemplate, and I use the word savor, like really savor the things in your life that you can honestly say you're thankful for. And for me, it's often people. it's circumstances. I'm really glad I have indoor plumbing and electricity and air conditioning and, the things that make my life easier than they would have been without. But oftentimes it's people. Like, I'm just so thankful I have this person in my life. I'm thankful I have this connection to them and that they love me and I have an opportunity to love them. And it's more than just acknowledging it or writing it down in your gratitude journal. It's spending some time with it. And that's also related to this idea, like a metta practice, a loving kindness meditation, where you receive love and send love to people you care about, but also the human race. So these are other things that you can do to help change perspective and manage stress.
Yeah, I like it. Well, anything else burning inside you that wants to come out, Steve, on the topic of stress and dessert?
Dessert. A good dessert is also a way to manage stress, all things in moderation. But that's another thing that my kid did after washing the windows. He made some chocolate chip cookies, and it was a great gift for the family.
That's cool.
So enjoy your dessert, manage your stress, and hopefully this is a useful episode for everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Psychedelic Therapy Frontiers is brought to you by Numinous Network, a company committed to helping people heal and be well by delivering technology-driven clinic support, clinical trial research, and comprehensive practitioner training in psychedelic-assisted therapy. You can learn more about Numinous Network at numinous.com. That's numinus.com. If you enjoyed the show today and you want to support us, here's how you do it. You can leave a rating or review on places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, subscribe to the Numinous YouTube channel, like the YouTube videos, and share the show with somebody you think might enjoy it. If you're interested in comprehensive training in psychedelic-assisted therapy, check out our courses at numinous.com/training. These courses are carefully crafted by Numinous professionals like myself, Reid, and others, and include live online classes, experiential learning, and opportunities to connect with a diverse community of practitioners in the psychedelic medicine space. I really love teaching these courses and connecting with you all, so check out numinous.com/training, and I hope to see you at the next training cohort. The content of this podcast does not constitute medical advice or mental health treatment. Please consult with a medical or mental health professional if you believe you are in need of mental health treatment.